What's up, guys? Time for King's Gambit. I believe it's King's Gambit series 5th video, and this is like the 5th most common move by black against the King's Gambit. So far we've covered all those sidelines, such as Queen F6, F5, Queen H4, let's call them bad variations. And in comparison to all previous variations, probably this one is the most serious one so far. Nc6 is called classic variation, and we're going to have a chance to see some very nice games. For example, Adelaide counter Gambit, used and advocated by Anthony Miles. Even Nepo, who made a course on Chessable, played one Adelaide counter Gambit. But a little bit more about all these Gambits a little bit later. So let's just go. After like Nc6, the very first thing you gotta remember, you should never take on e5. Please don't take on e5, because I've seen it a couple of times by kids. They play King's Gambit and then they take on e5. Come on, please don't go for it, because that's not a point. Because after Queen H4, if you play g3, you just lose the rook. A common trick. If you play King e2, Queen e4, King f2, Bishop c5, check, check, and this is very nice checkmate by black in only 8 moves. So when they go with classic variation Nc6, you definitely have to go with knight f3. Point of knight f3 is that, of course, you just want to now take on e5 and attack the center, because there is no more Queen h4 by black. So when you go with knight f3, we gotta check 3 possibilities. d6, which is absolutely the main approach by black players. E takes f4, kind of King's Gambit accepted, but with included knight f3, that definitely favors white in comparison to knight c6. And finally, there is Adelaide counter Gambit with f5. We're gonna discuss this one a little bit more. It could be tricky if you don't know what to do with white pieces. And of course, after this video, you're gonna know what to do and how to crush these guys. So after knight f3, let's go first with e takes f4. E takes f4 reminds me on some typical King's Gambit accepted variations, but I once again insist, when you play d4, it definitely gives you way better control of the center, because we have knight f3, which we anyways are going to do in the King's Gambit, while they're not necessarily going to play knight c6 in most of these lines. So after d4, they have so many options. Let's take a look at one of the most critical ones, g5. It looks like King's Gambit accepted. They just want to defend the pawn on f4, and they go with this one, and this is a reminiscent of some Muzio Gambit variations. You play d5, they go g4, you take on d6, and they take on f3, c6. So when they take on f3, you take by queen. I want to tell you one thing. You remember those Muzio Gambit? You can find them here on the channel, I believe, in 2 videos. And there, we even sack the whole knight for the initiative. Here, we don't sack anything. We just take the knight back on c6, and that's an improvement in comparison to Muzio Gambit variations. I found Queen h4 in a couple of these lines, nothing, just g3. It's a classic approach. Now your rook is open on the h file, attacks the queen, they go back, and you know what? You can take on b7, take on d7, but I'd come up with my improvement queen on b3. You attack on b7, threatening to take, and when they take, you play bishop f4. What I like about this position is my activity. First of all, I can choose to place my knight either on c2 or on d2. That's first thing. I have an open h-file, and guys, keep in mind, they have like 3 pawn islands. I isolated pawn on h7, f7, and these double pawns on c6 and c7. On top of all that, I'm a little bit better in terms of my development. So definitely, this would be an improvement with this 10th move, queen to b3. If they play d takes c6, I just take on f4, and let me just show you one nice game. Queen h4 and played bishop g4. Nothing. We don't want to give them that. We play queen c3, queen f6 only move to defend the rook and the queen, and now h3. When they take, thanks for developing our knight. Thanks for developing our rook as well. And after bishop d6, this guy played e5, bishop e2, brought the rook into the center, and White managed to win this game afterwards. Once again, 3-pawn islands for our opponent. Also, we do have 3-pawn islands, but we have a nice knight a4 afterwards with a nice control of the dark squares, and white is just better. Apart from this move, g5, there is a move knight f6. Looks like a normal development, and here there is a very common mistake by white players who automatically on autopilot they just do knight c3. Don't do that. That's a very important improvement of my analysis in comparison to so many books and articles. Not knight c3 because of bishop b4. They just threaten an e5. They want to go here. They want to play d5. Don't do that. But actually go with the queen e2. A very big improvement. You defend the pawn on e4. Yes, you do block the light square bishop, but what do you actually get? You are not interested in anything but taking on f4, playing knight c3, and playing long castles. So, if they go knight h5, you just want a complete development. Bishop d2, you want to play knight c3, and when the guy played d6, a very interesting move, queen b5. Queen b5 threatens the knight on h5, threatens d5, and when the guy played g5, that is part of the black plans in this position because they just defend the knight this way, and possibly they can go with some g4. I like the game where the white went for d5, queen a4, played knight c3, sorry, to stop bishop b2, and afterwards took on c6, played bishop b5, g takes, bishop f3, and after queen h4 put the king in safety. Here white was up a pawn, and not just that, even though the king is in the center, it's not misplaced. You're up a pawn. They don't have any counter attacking chances. You don't have to worry about that, and what is so much better. In order to analyze this, you can just take a look and put this into your engines, but it's not about the engines. When you play knight f6 and you go with the queen e2, they are going to be confused. I found just a couple of games like this because normal stuff like d6, you just take on f4, and here is the point. We don't have knight being placed on c3, which gives us a great opportunity to build up a very connected pawn chain, starting from a2 to e4. Then our knight goes on d2, keeping the flexible knights. Then you go h3, g4, getting some space, and afterwards you go with the bishop g2. I'll show you a very nice plan here. Castles, you go with the bishop g3. You want to place your knight on h4 to either jump on f5 or, more importantly, to take the light square bishop on g6. You go rook a to e1, and you're so much better. I very much enjoy and like this position for white. Fantastic position, lots of space, development advantage. Black has lots of difficulties in these positions. Then after e takes f4, d4, I found the line d6, a normal line where you just have to follow footsteps of my student James from United States. He took on f4, knight f6, knight c3, and his opponent went with the bishop g4. Whether they play bishop g4 now or later, you just go into the same type of the game. My student played a game queen to d3. That's an improvement. That's absolutely the best move because you unpin yourself, you want to go with a long castle, and you just overprotect your pawn on e4. When black captured, you now have disconnected pawns and, more importantly, open g-file, which is going to turn out to be a crucial thing here in this game. Also, you've just won the bishop pair. So let's see how James finished his opponent. Played very creative. Bishop e7, castles, and played rook g1. So far, with the bishop pair, with the long castle, opposite side castles, and open g-file, what is the one who's got initiative? His opponent got so afraid of this and played g6. James played bishop h6, and probably black was counting on bishop f8, trading the dark square bishops off and somehow making his game a little bit easier. White went with the f4, don't forget, bishop pair, and I especially like this idea with f5. His opponent played knight b4, which kind of helped him because, you know what, I want to play f5 no matter what. Probably his opponent was afraid of pretty big pressure against the pawn on g6 by the queen on d3 and played knight b4. That's a bad move, let's be honest. Queen h3, queen d7. He was looking to somehow exchange the queens. Are you crazy to trade the queens off if attack is... First of all, you play the king's gambit, so don't do it. So f5, and now he's got all systems ready. His opponent played a5 out of, I don't know, complete desperation, and James went for e5. D takes e5. Of course that he could have gone with d takes e5, but then knight d5 and some e6, but he played a very lovely combination with the bishop c4. Opens up the bishop, threatens on g6, and goes after the weak king. His opponent took on d4, and he said, I was very happy when he took on d4, and when I realized that I could play f takes g6. After queen h3, g takes f7, king h8, bishop g7 was made. So this is a typical king's gambit game that I enjoy so much. After d6, bishop f4, knight f6, knight c3, let's imagine they go with bishop e7, and here on bishop e7, you don't play queen d3 because you don't know if they're necessarily going to go with the bishop g4, so you play bishop e2. If they now go bishop g4, now you won't play, like in previous line, queen to d3, because previously when the queen was on d3, you always... you save the tempo with the g takes f3, and then your light square bishop doesn't have to go there. But here you go castles, castles, and take a look at the following plan by this guy who played with white pieces. Queen d2, rook a to d1, normal development, a3. I like this move a3 because it always gives us possibility to go with the bishop d3 without giving them knight b4. That's a very nice king's gambit move, and it is going to be repeated so many times here. After rook e8, king h1, always likable because we always want to put our king in some sort of safety and not to give them any kind of attack. So when you play like bishop g6, bishop d3, this is what I like about a3. No more knight b4, and with the bishop d3, I've just defended pawn on e4, and even more, I opened up the e file. So after bishop f8, this guy played rook e1, played bishop g5 going after the knight on f6. That's why there's common ideas in FIDE games or some rile up as openings here, they don't seem to be working because f file is open, which reminds me on my favorite opening, bishop's opening with white, and you all know that I made a course on Chessable regarding the bishop's opening. So after bishop e7, e5, d takes, knight g4, captured, played knight d5, took by queen, and after this took here, played knight f6, and black resigned. What a crushing game by white here, and another very, very successful presentation of this. So finally, if they can play g5, if they can play knight f6, d6, what happens with one of the most logical things, d5, reminds me of some Scandinavian games, you play knight c3. I found more than 50 games where black played queen d8. Queen d8 is bad. It's bad. You just play d5, and when they go like knight c on e7, bishop b5, bishop d7, queen e2, you'll take on f4, king is exposed in the center. Take a look at this. I mean, all his pieces are on the back rank. It can't be good. So when they go with the bishop b4, a specialty here is bishop d3. And of course, they cannot take on d4, because you just have famous discovery and you win the queen. And what do they have to do? They gotta go with the bishop g4, and watch out, looks kind of terrifying. But you play castles, which is a little bit of a, not a little bit, it's a big problem for them because now you threaten the queen. They gotta take, and now we've just won the bishop pair. And after castles, bishop f4, knight f6, rook to b1. I'd say that after rook to b1, we have a nice initiative on the b file. Plus, we got a bishop pair. Plus, this is positioned with opposite side castles, which gives us a great attacking chances. I'll show you a game. Black played a6, probably to play and to stop some rook b5 ideas by white. So a6, queen c1. I like this move a lot because queen just reroutes itself to b2. It goes there, threatens on b7. So after knight a5, goes with c4. Nice deflections, because you can't take. Eventually b7 is going to be hanging. But at the same time, you just want to go on d2 to harass this knight on a5, which is defending this pawn on b7. So what happens? Queen c6, knight e5 first, because he was threatening to take and to take on d4. You just go knight e5. You just play bishop d2. Knight is absolutely in a bad situation here, and white won in just like 16 moves. What a nice game. What an easy game. And when you have an open file, just try to take advantage of it this way. And finally, we go with a third move that is very interesting here. It's called Adelaide counter Gambit. Adelaide counter Gambit was first used by these top guys, by Tony Miles. He was trying to counter King's Gambit players with a counter Gambit f5. Here, all you have to do, just 3 moves. So you gotta take on f5, that's very important thing. And when they push e4, you gotta jump on e5, threatening on h5. And here, watch this out. I have some very nice improvements. If they go knight e5, queen e7, looks like we're about to lose this pawn. We give check, and still position is not done. You gotta know 2 more moves. He wants to take on e5. d4 to defend it. They cannot play anything but e takes d3. They're now threatening here. An absolute refutation is queen g5. Who would say that the queen g5 is refutation of this? Because if you play bishop g5, they can just go with knight f6, and you can't take, and you have problems here. You have problems with d takes c2, and believe it or not, it's nothing. Also, they threaten the queen to take, so it's lost. You can't go with the queen here because there is this pawn. So this is why you gotta come up with the queen g5. I only found one game being played like this, and this is the point. So they gotta take on c2. You play knight c3 and say, and what? And what do you want now? If you take on g5, I'm gonna recapture and afterwards get a pawn on c2. If knight f6, queen f4 to defend, e6, bishop c4. Looks like our center is collapsing, but we don't care about that. Queen f5, watch this out, threatens the knight. Bishop g5 threatens the knight. And after this, recaf to e1. With the king in the center, pawn that he's feeling like a bone in his throat, this is like completely winning. And this guy resigned after rook e8, bishop c2, queen f4, bishop h4, rook e6, and he resigned the game. What a nice thing after knight e5. In the case of knight f6, you have to remember following moves. Knight c3, and when they play d5, you just go bishop e5. That's all you need to know. The thing is, when they play bishop d7, crucial move is d3, because you just break the center. And if they take, you just take by queen, defend on f5, and even d5 is weak. If they go bishop b4, you just take on c6, and I'll show you one nice game. Bishop a3, e takes d3, c takes, queen b8, and queen e2. Believe it or not, he couldn't stop attack and knight c6 by white, and he resigned in 13 moves. What a lovely King's Gambit approach here. So we've seen so far, after knight f3, e takes f4, f5, and it's time for d6. This reminds me very much on some of the variations of the bishop's opening, apart from the fact that in bishop's opening, our bishop necessarily has to stand on c4. Here, there is an option. You go with the bishop e5. Let me put it this way. This is for like you who, I don't know, don't have so much experience with this King's Gambit ideas. So the thing is, if they go with bishop g4, you always chase it, and when they take, you win the bishop pair. Point is that you want to play castle and play like this. I found knight g on e7, one of the most flexible approaches by white. You play castle and you want to play f takes c5. They gotta go a6, b5, knight e4 to get rid of the bishop pair. We play queen f2, we keep our heavy pieces being lined up on the file, and a takes b3. With open a file, pressure on a6, with threat of f takes c5, white is so much better. Look at this. If he has to play f6, I mean, I'm going to break his defense no matter what. They can even consider active d4. I can maybe wait with d3 and then knight c3. So many options, but white is just so much better. In the case of bishop b5, bishop d7, we just go with d3. What do I like about this one? Now you threaten to take on c6 and to take on e5. They gotta go. They can't play a6. They have to complete development with knight f6. But if they do it, then we just go bishop c6 and win the pawn. So here, d3 is a crucial thing because with d3 I'm defending this one and I don't give you knight f6 to attack my pawn. So the thing is, probably they would have to take like this, in which case we just take by bishop on f4. And no matter what I do, like knight f6, you just go knight c3, they go bishop e7, and you know how much we like these type of positions because we've got an upper hand in these positions. Here, first of all, I can go back with the bishop. I can play a3, bishop c4, bishop a2, like this. So if you ever play a6, I can save it like this and go in here. And from another point of view, I can just go with something else. So when you play castles, I can just go with a move like d4, getting the center and bringing my bishop back on d3. I just want to make sure to pave up the way for this bishop with a3 afterwards, which should give me like a very a lovely game. So all things considered, I don't think they can play after bishop b5, bishop d7 successfully. I think engines say they gotta take on f4. I fully agree, and here you have to be very cautious. Engines prefer this position for black if you play the most logical castle because of g5. And I agree. They want to go g4, they want to play bishop g7, and those who are a little bit familiar with these positions, they're okay with this position. I analyze d3 to get a pawn back immediately and to go into something like we've seen. If they play knight f6, bishop d7, a6, we always go with the classic ideas. But problem is g5. Then, since your rook is on h1, you can challenge it with h4, play knight d4, threatening here, taking by bishop, and playing bishop f4. Position is roughly, I'd say, okay, it's a little bit better. We can also go with h5 and h6. We want to go afterwards with knight d2. We can even play short castle if needed, but it's a little bit difficult position. They want to go like this, playing knight g6, and you play h5. You play h5 to avoid this, to go h6 yourself. In my opinion, white has initiative here. Although, when you play bishop b5 and they take on f4, I definitely think that we should be going with d4 with a full center. When we go with a full center, they need to go with the bishop d7. We take on f4, and look at this. Knight f6 is the most logical move, but if they play a6, always put your bishop back on d3 to defend on e4, and I'll show you a game of Grandmaster Daniel Campora, played like 30 years ago. Knight f6, castles, bishop e7, c3. So whenever you have a chance to build up the strong center and play like this, do it. And go with the knight bd2, h3, queen c2, rook a2, and fantastic mobilization of white pieces. And now Campora played queen f2, which I like a lot. Look at this maneuvering. Queen f2, king h8, and bishop b1 to lovely go with the battery, and afterwards to go and crush this king on h8 with e5. Fantastic bishop b1 move. So look at this one. Queen f2 followed by bishop b1 and queen c2. So nice. And finally, bishop f4, knight f6, knight c3. Any a6, you just play bishop d3 and just make sure to secure that bishop with a3, bishop e7, castles, castles, and a3. We always go with this move because I expect by these guys to force us to play a6 with the bishop d3. I analyze these positions with the bishop g4 because now they attack this pawn on d4. You bring it back. And I like bishop h5 because they want to play knight g4 and they want to go back with the bishop g6 with the pressure on e4. We got to play h3 to avoid at least one thing. And here we play queen e1. Not so logical. Not so logical, but you don't have to worry. At the moment, we don't have problems with a4 pawn. Rook e8. Nice x-rays by rook on e8. Rook to d1. Overprotecting, but you'll see what's the point. If they play bishop f8, what everyone would do here, it doesn't seem to be working because of bishop g5, and now they have lots of problems with this. They don't have h6 because we're just going to take on f6. For example, you take, and if you take, I can choose how am I going to jump like this and threaten your queen, take the bishop and weaken the king side. If you take by this, I don't even want to discuss these positions. So this is the point. Even if they play rook e8, they can't go after the e4 pawn. And if they play d5, e5 knight e4, I especially like not exchanging the knights, undermining the knight on e4 with c4, but more importantly, going with the knight on f4, going after the bishop on g6, and playing with the bishop pair. I found one game with a knight g5. The guy took on g5, captured like this, and played knight f4 with a strong center, inability to take on d4 because of bishop g6, with the idea of some bishop g6, rook to d3, and rook g3 ideas, or instantly going with a, I don't know, something like that, with the threat of taking on d5, what is just so much better. And definitely we should very much like to play against the classic variation, second move, knight c6. Hope that you enjoyed in this King's Gambit presentation against this variation, and I really hope you're going to have lots of nice results with it in the future. Thanks for watching, and we continue the series with the next move. I don't want to tell you which one is going to be that. Bye-bye.